I found a locked room in my billionaire father's house. I wish I hadn't. My father was a man of cold marble and ironed shirts. He built an empire on transparency, yet he spent his whole life hiding in the shadows of this very mansion. After the funeral, the house went silent. I found it. It wasn't in his office. It was behind a bookshelf in the nursery, the room I hadn't stepped foot in for 50 years. The door didn't look like a door. It looked like a mistake in the wood. But the silver key my father wore around his neck for 8 decades fit perfectly. I thought I'd find old ledgers, maybe proof of a hidden family, or the source of the wealth that felt more like a curse than a gift. I expected to find a reason to hate him, or a reason to finally love him. But when the heavy oak door creaked open, the smell hit me first. Not dust, not rot. It was the scent of expensive lilies, fresh as if someone had just placed them there an hour ago. And then I saw the monitors, rows of them, glowing with a soft blue light in the windowless room. I walked to the center of the room and looked at the main screen. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It felt like it stopped entirely. The screen wasn't showing stock markets or bank accounts. It was a live feed of my own kitchen, from 10 different angles. I saw myself sitting right here at this table, 30 years younger, holding my firstborn son. And next to it, a folder titled, The Price of Silence, 1974 to 2026. I realized then that my father hadn't just been a billionaire. He'd been a ghost in my life, watching every tear I cried, every secret I whispered, and every mistake I made. And he had been paying people to make sure I never found out the worst part. I found the locked room. And now, looking at the files on that desk, I realized that my entire life, my marriage, my career, even my miracle recovery from surgery, was a script written by a man who loved me enough to protect me and hated me enough to never let me be free. To understand that room, you have to understand the man who built it. My father, Silas, didn't live like a man who owned the skyline. He lived like a man who was hiding from it. He wore the same 3 gray suits for 20 years. He drove a dented sedan that rattled when it idled. Every Sunday, he'd sit right here and clip coupons from the newspaper, grumbling about the price of eggs. I grew up believing we were comfortable but careful. I felt guilty asking for a new pair of shoes for prom. But there was always a strange tension, a curiosity I couldn't shake. Like the time I scraped my knee as a child in a park 5 miles from home. Before I could even start crying, a black car pulled up. A man in a suit handed me a silk handkerchief and said, "Your father is expecting you." How did he know I was there? How did he know I was hurt? When I got married to Arthur, Silas insisted on a small backyard ceremony. "Big weddings are for people with something to prove," he'd say, sipping his lukewarm tea. He gave us a modest check, $5,000, and told us to spend it wisely. We struggled for years. Arthur worked 2 jobs, and I stretched every penny. But whenever a crisis hit, a miracle happened. When the bank was 2 days away from foreclosing on our first home, we suddenly received a letter saying there had been an accounting error and our mortgage was paid in full. When Arthur was laid off, a headhunter called him 3 hours later with a dream job. I used to look at Silas and ask, "Dad, do you have something to do with this?" He'd just adjust his glasses and say, "The world is full of coincidences, Mary. Just be grateful." But the curiosity ate me. Why did the local police chief always tip his hat to my father with a look of pure terror? Why did our simple gardener have a military-grade radio strapped to his belt? As Silas aged, the simple facade started to crack. One night, I stopped by the house unannounced. I found him in the study, talking to a man I recognized from the evening news, a senator known for his iron will. The senator was on his knees, weeping, begging my father for just 1 more week. Silas didn't even look up. He just said, "The interest on a secret is higher than the interest on a loan, George. You're out of time." When he saw me standing in the doorway, his face instantly shifted back into that of a weary, simple old man. "Mary, dear, you're just in time for some toast." The senator vanished from public life the next day, No scandal, no news, just gone. It made me wonder, what kind of simple man has the power to erase a senator before the tea kettle even whistles? The year before he died, Silas became obsessed with legacy. He started giving me gifts that didn't make sense for a man on a fixed income. A diamond brocade that looked like it belonged in a museum. A deed to a plot of land in Switzerland. "I'm just clearing out the attic," he'd claim. But when I checked the attic, there was nothing but old newspapers. Then came the final mystery, the one that set the stage for the locked room. On his deathbed, his last words weren't, "I love you" or "goodbye." He leaned in, his breath smelling of peppermint and antiseptic, and whispered, "Check the nursery, Mary. I've been paying for your mistakes since the day you were born. It's time you saw the invoice." I stood there, watching him take his last breath, realizing that the simple man I loved was a stranger. And the curiosity was no longer an itch. It was a scream. What mistakes? I had been a perfect daughter. I had lived a quiet life. Or so I thought. I walked toward that nursery, not knowing that the man I called father hadn't just been watching my life. He had been the one pulling the strings of every person I ever loved. The silver key felt like ice against my palm as I stood before that nursery door. I hadn't stepped foot in here since my mother passed away 40 years ago. Silas had kept it locked, claiming it was too painful to revisit. The door creaked open, and the blue light from the monitors flooded the hallway. I stepped inside, my breath hitching. The room was cold, climatized like a high-tech server farm. On the central desk lay a single leather-bound book, a ledger. But it wasn't filled with business transactions. It was a timeline of my life. I looked at a page dated June 14th, 1992. It was the day my high school sweetheart, Tommy, disappeared. He'd told me he was moving to another state for a job. I cried for months. But here, in my father's precise handwriting, was the truth. Subject Thomas approached, paid $50,000 to relocate. Non-disclosure agreement signed. Reason: he would have kept Mary in this small town. She needs to move toward the city. The plan must stay on track. My stomach churned. The curiosity turned into a cold, hard knot of dread. Silas didn't just watch my life. He was editing it. He was removing the people he didn't approve of like they were typos in a manuscript. I turned the pages, my hands shaking. I found the section on Arthur, my husband. I remembered how we met, a chance encounter at a library where he happened to be reading my favorite book. The ledger entry read, "Arthur Vane, vetted, background clean. Financial status, destitute. Perfect for the role. $200,000 transferred to his inheritance via a front company to make him a viable suitor. He believes it was his late uncle's money. He must never know Silas is the benefactor." Everything was a lie. My marriage, our struggles, even Arthur's confidence. It was all financed by the man who sat at our table and complained about the price of bread. But then I saw a red bookmark, a section titled, "The Incident." I followed the instructions in the ledger and opened a small safe behind a framed picture of a sleeping lamb. Inside was a digital recorder. I pressed play. A voice, Silas's voice, but younger, sharper, filled the room. "The surgery was a success. Mary thinks it was a routine appendix removal. She must never know what the doctors actually found. If she knew the truth about her bloodline, she would realize why she can never have children of her own. The secret must die with the medical team. Pay them double." I never had children. I thought I was barren. Arthur and I spent years in heartbreak, and Silas would sit there patting my hand, saying, "God has a different plan, Mary." The curiosity was now a poison. He hadn't just removed people. He had removed my future. He had mutilated my body to keep a secret. But what secret? I sat in his chair, the one he had secretly occupied for hours while I thought he was sleeping. I typed my own name into his private database. A final file popped up, protected by a password. The hint was, "The name of your real mother." I froze. My mother was buried in the churchyard. Her name was Martha. I typed Martha. Access denied. I tried her middle name, access denied. My heart began to race. If Martha wasn't my real mother, then who was I? And why was there a red dot blinking over a high-security facility in a country I had never visited? Silas didn't just have a locked room, he had a locked identity. And the mistake he mentioned on his deathbed. It wasn't mine. It was his. I stared at the blinking red cursor. If Martha wasn't my mother, then Silas hadn't been hiding a fortune. He had been hiding a hostage. I thought of the only other name Silas ever spoke with reverence. It wasn't a family member. It was a woman he met during his years as an attaché in Europe. A woman whose portrait he kept in a locket, not his wallet. I typed, Alina. Access granted. The screen didn't open to a bank account. It opened to a scanned birth certificate from a country that no longer exists on most maps. My name wasn't Mary. It was Maria Catherine von Altenburg. I wasn't the daughter of a simple man from Ohio. I was the last surviving member of a royal bloodline that had been wiped out in a coup 50 years ago. The video showed a younger Silas, looking sharp and dangerous, standing in a burning courtyard. He was holding a bundle, a baby wrapped in a royal crest. Beside him was a woman in a tattered gown, Elena. She was bleeding, handing him the baby, whispering, "Hide her. Make her ordinary. If they find her, they will kill her to end the line." I watched as Silas, the man I thought was my humble father, took the baby and nodded. She will never know wealth. She will never know power. She will be the daughter of a ghost. The curiosity was now a heavy, suffocating blanket. My simple life wasn't a choice. It was a witness protection program. My barrenness? It wasn't a medical tragedy. Silas had paid those doctors to ensure I could never continue the lineage, because a child would be a beacon for the assassins still searching for the lost heiress. That red dot in a country I'd never visited? It was a Swiss bunker. And inside that bunker wasn't gold. It was my mother, Elena. The ledger's final entry was dated only a week ago. Elena's health is failing. The funds for her life support are dwindling. Mary must choose. If I die, the security protocols will lock the bunker. Either Mary becomes who she was born to be and claims the $40 billion in the hidden sovereign fund to save her mother, or she stays Mary and lets the last link to her past die in the dark. $40 billion. The weight of it felt like it would crush the floor beneath me. Silas hadn't been a simple man because he valued humility. He was simple because any display of wealth would have alerted the world to my existence. He lived in poverty so I could live in safety. The phone rang with a sound I had never heard, a low, melodic chime. I picked it up. My voice was gone, replaced by a cold, royal iron I didn't know I possessed. Hello? A voice on the other end, cold and professional, spoke in a language I shouldn't have understood, yet I did. The sovereign is dead. Long live the sovereign. We are outside, Maria. Your husband, Arthur? He's already been briefed. He was never just your husband. He was the first layer of the guard. We are coming in to take you home. I looked at the kitchen door. I heard the sound of heavy tires on the gravel driveway, not the rattle of a dented sedan, but the smooth hum of armored SUVs. Arthur walked into the nursery. He wasn't wearing his usual flannels. He was in a tactical suit, a sidearm on his hip, and his eyes. They weren't the eyes of the man I married. They were the eyes of a soldier who had been on duty for 30 years. "It's time, Mary," he said. Or should I say, Your Highness? I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just looked at Arthur, the man I had shared a bed with for 30 years, the man I thought had struggled alongside me to pay the heating bills. "Did you ever love me?" I whispered. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded like the ice in that Swiss bunker. Arthur paused. For a split second, the soldier flickered and the husband returned. My mission was to keep you alive, Maria. Love was the most effective way to ensure I never left your side. Silas paid me to be your shadow. But shadows don't have feelings. He reached out his hand, but I pulled back. I looked at the ledger one last time. There was a final envelope tucked into the back cover, sealed with red wax. I tore it open. It was a letter from Silas, written in a shaky hand just days before his heart gave out. Mary, or Maria, if you are reading this, the masquerade is over. You are probably looking at Arthur and feeling the sting of betrayal. But here is the twist, my child. I didn't just hire him to protect you. I hired him to betray me. I froze. I kept reading. The people who killed your family are still in power. They think I am the only one who knows where the sovereign fund is. They think Arthur is their spy. They've been paying him for years to lead them to you. But I knew. I doubled his salary, but I gave him a different task. Be the double agent. The $40 billion isn't just for your mother's medical bills. It is for a private army. I have spent 30 years buying the loyalty of the very mercenaries sent to kill you. I looked up at Arthur. He smiled, a real dangerous smile. The SUVs outside aren't the assassins, Maria. They are your honor guard. We've been waiting for Silas to pass so we could move. The hunters think they are coming for a victim. They don't know they are walking into a trap set 30 years ago. Within an hour, the simple cottage was swarming with people, but they weren't moving furniture. They were setting up satellite uplinks. I sat at my old kitchen table, the same one where I used to count pennies for the bus, and signed a digital document that moved $40 billion across the globe like a tidal wave. I am no longer Mary, but I am not exactly Maria Catherine either. I am a woman built from the lies of a billionaire father and the loyalty of a hired husband. People ask me if I miss the simple life, if I miss the days when my biggest worry was the price of eggs. Sometimes in the quiet of the night I do, because that simple life was the only thing that felt real. The $40 billion? It's just a tool. The crown? It's just a target. Silas lived as a poor man, not just to hide me, but because he knew that money is a cage. He wanted me to have 30 years of freedom before the cage door locked. The lesson I learned in that locked room is this: the truth doesn't set you free. It just gives you a heavier burden to carry. We spend our lives wishing for more money, more power, more secrets. But the most precious thing you can ever have is a life so ordinary that no one wants to steal it from you. My father was a billionaire who died in a threadbare chair. I am a queen who lives in a bunker. We both learned the same thing, that the only true wealth is the time you spend with someone who loves you for your soul, not your bank account, or your bloodline. Arthur was right about one thing. He was my shadow. And as we drove away from the only home I ever knew, I realized that even in the brightest light, you can never truly outrun your shadow.